YellowTelescope's YellowTelecast, the best practices for the best practices, providing the medical industry's best practices to the medical industry's best practices since 2008. Are you a doctor? Do you work for a doctor? Do you want to earn more, be more efficient, retain your team, hire for success, or just want to have a better lifestyle? I bet you do. What should you expect from the podcast? A lighthearted, casual, fun, hopefully funny, informative, impactful, well-founded look at the medical industry from a pair of a passionate, competent, confident, experienced, talented, questionably good-looking, unquestionably good-looking industry leaders, men of the Renaissance, if you will, and even if you won't, who enjoy Scotch whiskey, world travel, music, single malt Scotch whiskey, fine dining, not fine dining, family, art, and Ryan bourbon whiskeys while implementing intensive training and expert staffing, resulting in unparalleled growth. Listen to the podcast, and for more on how Yellow Telescope can help you grow, visit YellowTelescope.com for upcoming events, published articles, recorded speeches, past issues of our complimentary email newsletter, testimonials, and more.
Hello, Ed.
Jonathan Hoffenberg. How are you?
Edward Searing III. I'm well, and you?
Indeed, doing well to quite well. Thanks so much for asking. Welcome to episode almost 30, 29, I believe. My age also, ironically.
Almost 30. It's true, and I'm almost 40.
Oh, man, good to see you. Thank you all for joining us.
Fantastic to see you. Welcome to the podcast, the Yellow Telescope, YellowTelecast, Best Practices for the Best Practices podcast, something we record absolutely every single month.
To 1 year, consistently.
We're going to get way more consistent with these, which we'll talk a little bit about. I think our next one's already scheduled and planned in Cancun, Mexico in May on our company payoff trip. So we'll be recording live and direct from there. But we are excited to be back for the first time since our annual seminar. And we want to talk a little about why that is. But I know very, very first, we should probably just quickly introduce the topic for today.
Absolutely. In fact, I think it's almost related to our bit of a hiatus, which we talk about frequently, and about just being more intentional throughout the rest of this year. Obviously, we like to try to give some timely topics, distill down what we're seeing in other practices, and based on what we have been seeing as of late and our prognostication of how we can help folks moving forward, seems to be some ways that we can all be a little bit more intentional about how we are managing our practices, our teams, ourselves, our budgets.
Exactly. It's going to be pretty exciting. We really have seen an interesting situation sort of evolve since October, which was really almost before Omicron. For those of you in 2032 listening to that, that was a variant of COVID, which hopefully you don't remember. All the way through the peak of it in January, and now as we head into spring has sprung. Indeed, it's the Cubs opening day, Ed. It is also the Masters tournament for all of our golfers out there. So much. Flowers are growing. Seeds of change are being sown. It's all very exciting. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about what's shifted in each of our practices, and then how maybe with good intentions, we've become a little bit less intentional, and the benefits with both specific actionable tips as well as some philosophical ideas that we can help your practice grow through a little better planning, organization, and intentionality.
Indeed. Speaking of the Cubbies, by the way, I love that shirt. For those of you who can't see what I'm seeing here, go Cubbies. Was it an opening day recently?
It is literally right now. I am skipping the Cubs third inning.
There it is. Super fan. I knew it.
Just to do this. So that I had it streaming on my app. We had a double and didn't convert that into a run, but we've got Seiya, who's just joined us from Japan. Pretty exciting for the Cubs. We've got Madrigal has joined us. A lot of good things happening. Not sure this is our year because of the pitching. We're playing the formidable Milwaukee Brewers, led by Cy Young Award winner Burns and one of my all-time favorites and former Miami Marlin, Christian Yelich. It's going to be an exciting season for those who like baseball, but we're not here to talk about baseball, Ed. Although we could. Tell me a little bit about your baseball thoughts.
I went to the inaugural game of the Florida Marlins, now Miami Marlins, in 1993. That's bad. I went to a lot of the Florida Marlins games back in the day. that basically, it was funny, actually. My funny tidbit here is my father had season tickets, and then he said, you know what, I'm not really going to the games anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and cancel the season for next season. He's like, watch, they'll win the World Series. And they won the World Series that year. So you're welcome, everybody, for all you Marlins fans. My father, the late, great Edward Milton Searing Jr., actually willed that first World Series to happen. So
bittersweet, but quite the story. Quite the story. I did fly in for 5 of the 2016 Cubs World Series against the then Cleveland Indians. Also, spring has sprung, now the Cleveland Guardians, for politically correct reasons and to forward our society in the language and types of choices we make. So that's lovely.
Absolutely.
Congratulations to Cleveland. And sorry we kicked your butt in 2016.
So we've obviously got a great topic to discuss. We've got some whiskey to discuss as well. It has been a busy time for us. Why don't we have a sip? Because I've got a wee dram staring at me here, and I'm actually curious to see what you have brought here. This is like the little show and tell that we've got going on here, Jon.
Yeah, well, I've got a little bit of fun today on our whiskey tasting, and I know it's been a number of months since we did our last podcast, even though we're more consistent before and are about to become more. But I have something really, really fun, kind of interesting, that actually was one of the few purchases I made kind of with my wife in mind. There's an episode of The Simpsons where Homer buys Marge a bowling ball. She's very disappointed, and he said, well, I bought you what I would have wanted. And so this is a little bit in that vein. However, this is the Highland Park 21-year-old Winter Storm edition, which is findable, but not easily. So a lot of age on it, which is delicious. 21 years, but Glenfiddich, meaning typically a Highland malt, typically a little bit of light peatiness and smokiness, but not on the level of your Lafroigs and Ardbegs and Islas. But a little more peat than maybe your space sides like a Macallan or Glenlivet, Balvenie, etc. What's really unique and interesting about this bottle is that it is aged, like they're really doing a lot of different aging programs in various different casks. So we all think of sherry casks, or oak, or ex-rum cast, things like that. This one is the only one I'm aware of that was aged in ice wine casks. And my wife really likes ice wine. It's a nice little aperitif before or after dinner beverage, very sweet. It's late harvest grapes that get all that sugar into them. And it's almost a dessert wine, if you will. And so it's supposed to impart some of that really deep raisiny, sugary note to it. So we're going to test it out and try it. I did have a sip a few weeks ago. It was delicious. My wife then had a sip because I explained all this to her, and she about spit it out. So yeah. We're over one on that. But I did it out of love. It's not an inexpensive bottle. It shows I care about her. So cheers, honey. Sorry you don't like the ice wine. Typically from Canada, I think Inniskillen, I believe, is one of the major, more famous brands. That's what I have for you today. What do you have, Edward?
Wow. Nowhere near as thoughtful, actually. Although I think it's kind of funny because I'm actually just picturing Jon and go, I like ice wine, and then tasting whiskey, and just like your brain doesn't quite make that connection,
Gentle notes imparted on the liquor, the cask does. Otherwise it would just taste like ice wine, and then you should just have an ice wine.
Yeah, exactly. I think she might like ice wine in whiskey barrels, maybe, versus the alternative. I don't know. Mine is actually nowhere near as exciting. In fact, it was actually a bit of a lesson and a bit of a moment into the mind of the purchase process of whiskey, and maybe just my own personal. I'm actually in the process of moving house, as they say, occasionally, and particularly in other countries like around the British realms of the world. And it's all packed up. We literally were going to do a podcast, and I'm like, oh yeah, what am I gonna drink? No, actually didn't have anything. So ran out to my local shop and thought, okay, what can I actually go with? And I've tried to get real creative and very thoughtful the way you did with a selection, and couldn't actually really find anything that had sort of connection. I'm like, maybe it's something a place you and I have visited, or a distillery that we've been to, or something that really tells a story. And I thought, you know what, let me just go with an Old Faithful. Let me just go back to basics, go back to what I know works. and kind of brings all those things together. I went with an Abalor 16.
I didn't know you were going to go that delicious, because that is a delicious, delicious bottle. I thought you were going to say, and at the bottom shelf, I found a bottle for $8.99 of moonshine.
That was one of the other thoughts that I had, which was like, basically, you know, I thought it would be fun on, you know, very first ever podcast to sip directly from the airplane bottle. Just a tiny, like, but I decided also, you know, it's something that, you know, again, is enjoyed in moderation. And I'm going to be able to have this for a long time. It is a Speyside single malt. It's double cask matured, kind of known for it. Speaking of that kind of raisiny, you know, sweetness a little bit.
Yeah, very sherry, right?
A little bit of fruity, sort of brown sugar. It's a little bit of a rainy day here. And I thought, yeah, you know, why not? And so I'm excited about it. Finally, I'll bring it full circle and note, which I probably haven't. I did this in previous episodes and actually sipped on an Abalor, that the founder of the distillery, his motto was "Let the deed show." So leads into our concept, our philosophy for this topic of intentionality, and actually letting your deeds do all the talking. So cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers, buddy. Let's try it. Those of you guys in YouTube land that aren't in just podcast land, two interesting things. One is you can see kind of the dark, rich, kind of more yellowy brown color versus Ed's, which is going to be more of that really heavy sherry red. Makes sense given the ice wine versus the sherry finish, which is fascinating. Also, the reason that Ed knows their slogan so well, "Let the deed show," and I know it as well, is one of the distilleries we toured on my 40th birthday trip to Scotland. So it's got a special place in my heart. And what's really cool is they made you do a blind tasting in all dark black sippers, little
tasting glasses.
Tasting glasses, yeah. And it was interesting. Like, I was sure I had everything right. Totally wrong. So that's why I enjoy whiskey, but I'm not a whiskey sommelier by any stretch or any expert, which is interesting. I also drank this out of my 10th mountain whiskey glass, which I procured in Vail a few years ago, where that is made, and just got back from a couple of weeks there. So it's been a fun run. You guys haven't heard a ton from us over the last few months, in part because it's been busy here. We've been really, really excited and fortunate for the last few months we had. Before we dive into our topic, just 60 to 120 seconds. We had a great YellowTelescope seminar, which was awesome. It was our most highly attended of all time. Once again, I think rated 9.56 out of 10 based on honest reviews, which is awesome. I believe all but 2 or 3 practices signed up for next year. We outsold all of this year's attendance at the event before we walked out the door. We've now basically sold out the event this year, although we understand usually a few percent will cancel as we get a little closer because, you know, things come up and what have you. So we're basically selling our last few seats at ASAP's in Vegas coming up. And we are sold out basically for next year, although we'll have a few more spots that'll probably be, you know, opening here and there through the spring and early summer. But we did announce the big news, which hopefully is on our social media, is that for the first time ever in our 12th annual YellowTelescope seminar, last year was our 11th, we're no longer going back to the Mandarin Oriental this year, or the St. Regis, or the Fountain Blue, which are the last 3 years that we had. This year, just for fun, after 11 years in Miami, we announced that we're going to be doing it at the Ritz-Carlton, Cancun, Mexico.
That's it. Oh man, it was one of my favorite all-time moments. Was at the 11th annual seminar when we announced the venue to the world with live mariachi actually marching in with the full announcement. And yeah, people are really excited. Our attendees are really excited to, you know, and again, it's actually not even that much different from a travel perspective, other than, yes, please get your passport renewed. There's lines for those things to actually be able to attend, but it feels worlds away in so many ways, but at the same time, the same level of hospitality that you'd expect from a Ritz-Carlton and from a YellowTelescope seminar. So yeah, we're
almost everywhere flies there direct, and you know, it's a 2-hour flight from Miami, so it's, you know, like us going to Atlanta. So we're super excited about it. So in any case, we had that, and we also partially because we had some pent up demand coming out of COVID, in the same way that the doctors were struggling through the shutdown, but then had this wave of success sort of wash over them, flowing like a twig on the shoulders of a mighty stream. for several months afterwards. And that has continued with the just general growth of the aesthetic industry for the last year or two. The doctors are doing better. Everybody is back to, I wouldn't say normal, what with COVID still being present, albeit muted to a great degree. And people are back to growing the business and realizing that we can get through these things. And so because of that, we've been extra busy. I think we had more clients jump on board with YellowTelescope in about a 6-week period than I think we had over the last 3 or 4 years combined, even pre-COVID, our best years. So we are experiencing explosive growth, but we never grow without delivering an exceptional product. So we've been a little less present on social media. We had 2 of our senior people out on maternity leave. We have 2 new awesome Yellow Tele babies. And we've really focused intentionally our priorities on our client work, client launches, and existing clients. And the results have been tremendous. So even though we haven't been super present, we've been around. I will mention 1 or 2 quick stats. One is our average client last year grew by over $1.25 million in revenue. And that wasn't over a bad COVID year. That was over our average client growing by, I can't remember the exact numbers, $400,000 to $500,000 the year before, and by growing $350,000 to $450,000 the year before that. So we actually over doubled our growth year over year, if not tripled our growth, after growing in huge amounts the last 2 years. So that was super exciting. Things are going really, really well for the clients, but we are getting back at it, and we are going to be at a couple meetings coming up, Ed. Gentle transition to Ed.
We certainly are. And, it's interesting because we have been also getting back on the road, right? I know I was visiting practices up in New York and New Jersey and Oklahoma City. I'm going to be visiting another one in the Inland Empire of California coming up, working with clients and launching in Dallas, Texas. I know you've been out to Colorado.
Couple, 3 times. I try to, if you're in Colorado and want to hire me, that's great, because I will do your client work. And then I usually just go skiing afterwards, which is great. Kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So I've done Colorado Springs, Denver. We have another Denver client launching, and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. We've also been out to Santa Fe in New Mexico, Albuquerque area, et cetera. So we've got a lot of clients coming up. And of course, we are also going to be speaking in just a couple of weeks at the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons, ASAP's annual meeting. The Aesthetic Meeting is coming up in San Diego. We're excited to be back on faculty there again and in person in a big event, and come by and see us if you guys are going to be out there in the exhibit hall. Also be having some cocktail hours and dinners and whatnot. Come by and say hello to the team. And then of course, we're also going to be at the Vegas Cosmetic Surgery meeting annually, I think for like our 14th year in a row or something. We've been speaking there.
Gotta be over 10 years. I don't know the exact number. I think we're probably 11, 12, 13, who knows? Maybe 30 years. No.
Sort of the annual pilgrimage, if you will. We're also going to be at the multi-specialty aesthetic conference, also back out in San Diego in August. We've got the Global Aesthetics Conference. If there's an acronym, name it. We're probably going to be there. And then of course the annual YT seminar as well. So fun to be on the road again. And also speaking to so many different practices, obviously not only do we have our own clientele that we're talking to every week or two, but we're also having, quite a spike in interest from, other practices who are like, wow, things have been really good, but is this still a flash in the pan? Can this really last? Maybe I do need to work on my fundamentals, or gosh, now that I'm so busy, it's exposing all these weaknesses that my practice might have, or I'm trying to really grow to the next level because I feel like I've plateaued. What can you do to help me? So we're having lots of conversations with folks, both folks that are new to the YellowTelescope world, and also ones that have maybe been in it for a long time. And I think that kind of leads us to our topic about kind of what we're seeing and how we can move forward all together at this stage in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're listening and you're listening before any of these meetings coming up and you want to get in touch with us, I not only will be at the booths and stuff during the day and giving a few talks. We have a great lunch and learn on Friday at Vegas. I'm almost thinking about titling it "The Most Important 2 Hours You Spend for Your Business Ever," because we think it's going to be that good to be at that Friday lunch and learn. So make sure you get in the room, because I think the room will be full. But in addition to those things, we're also, I've actually researched a lot of really cool restaurants in Vegas. So if you want to go to a really cool restaurant with me, shoot us a message, because we're doing some client dinners in each of these places, in cases, San Diego and Vegas. So get in touch as an aside. But yeah, so it's been busy. Things are good. Doctors doctors are doing well, practices are growing, and not because things look good. The reality is, the very, very worst of, actual offices being shut down for 1 to 5 months is over from a couple of years ago. But remember, in August of last year, we had a really, really scary variant with Delta that both affected business, but also scared the heck out of a lot of people and changed the way they acted. And then we had a gajillion people get Omicron between December and January, which flowed into February and really only normalized around mid to late February. So although we predicted those things and work through them, we've gotten a lot better at dealing with those things. It hasn't really been a smooth run. It's almost in spite of that we've been successful, not just us as a company, but all the clientele and all of you out there that aren't clients. And so it's a testament to that. The business actually is pretty good. The economy is actually in a pretty good place, despite those headwinds coming. So yeah, that leads to kind of this topic of intentionality. And, I think, Ed, you kind of, I don't know if you came up with a topic per se, but we were chatting about a week ago, and you kind of just had a couple of anecdotal stories, I think leads in well to what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk philosophically, psychologically, I think first, as we always do, and then talk about some actionable steps and how we work backwards to create just a more organized, profitable, smart business.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because we've, kind of tested and preached about the hierarchy of decision making or investment within your practice. We've had our topic we've lectured on for many years about the marketing ladder, for example, that we can talk about, and where you should be investing your dollars.
The talk I'm giving in Vegas, by the way, the marketing ladder, exactly what to do in what order for how much money and when.
Yeah, which again also is not only just a topic that we've been giving for years, but I love because it's fluid based on the ever-changing world of marketing. But also it's just even within the aspect of your entire practice, your whole business, from people to technology to space to decor, and prioritizing all these sorts of things. And it's really been interesting because it's been a couple of years since, you and I have obviously been sort of covering, quote unquote, the state of our industry throughout COVID, kind of through the podcast. And it went from everyone panicking, firing their staff, unless you were a YellowTelescope client, because we had 0 layoffs of any of our clientele, not a single patient care coordinator. But there was panic, right? And then, of course, it was, well, oh my gosh, there's all this pent up demand. And then is this going to last? And then there's been ebbs and flows a little bit slightly here. We were cheering the return of seasonality and things like that. But even though that there have been these headwinds and hurdles that we've had to overcome, particularly among our clientele, we've seen how strong it's actually been. And, how we've been preaching, these are the good old days kind of has really rung true. And in the whole roaring 20s analogy is interesting to me because it feels like that. And not just because people are out in nightclubs partying without masks on again, as if that actually really stopped in some places like the state of Florida, where we never
had COVID here. It's fine.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. But also because people are spending like it's going out of style. And in some ways that can be good. Obviously, we can also wax tangentially about the state of the economy and inflation, and also maybe some of the other things that it's done for wages and the increases. And I know we're going to touch a little bit on staffing and how it relates to your management of your team going forward. But it's been interesting because I have among our clientele who, I think are heck smart people, if for no other reason that they decided to bring us on to help selfishly. We do not have a client that hasn't grown for good reason in the last year. And of course, as we like to say, demonstrably, you're losing money by not having some form of YellowTelescope within your practice. So they're already really good, people are open to growing and getting coaching and getting that development. And yet I'm finding out way after the fact, they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a device without a single plan to be able to market it or any training for their team, et cetera. Or they're bringing on a new treatment, or they've hired a really expensive person, or they've rented new space, things like that. And now again, nobody needs our permission at all. It's your business. Please do what you will. But heck, why wouldn't you check in and be like, hey, can you help me put together a little bit of a strategy here? And then secondarily, I've talked to practices that are meeting for the very, very first time, who are asking for assistance or, have some sort of pain point or problem that they need a solution to within their practice. And in my discovery of, how things have been going for them and learning about their team and things like that, and also asking what their plans are, I'm finding that they have rented second spaces, bought the technology, et cetera. And then even diving into their profit and loss statement, their P&L, their overhead is so high currently because they've been overspending on things. I actually wouldn't be able to sleep that well at night, even though I know the return on investment would be so high. Having them, hire YellowTelescope, for example. I'm like, we actually need to wait, let you cool off here a little bit, or even take a further dive into your P&L and find the money to be re-spending on the right things. So I think it kind of led to us discussing a little bit about back to basics, but just trying to take a step back and be a little bit more intentional about the forward thinking as you head into the rest of this year and next year with, potentially less headwinds, but who knows, still some unknowns ahead of us.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, to me, I think about why is it that we act this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both good and bad. Sometimes we make just the perfect decision. We never really think back about what led us to make that great decision. And then other times we just look back and say, wow, what a ding dong I was last Tuesday. And we don't necessarily look at that and say, okay, what kind of led to that decision? And, what I think is interesting is, again, as we just noted, you could look back at the last 3 years. And if you knew then what you know now, you would have said, these 3 years have been the best 3 years in history.
Right.
Despite being shut down for months at a time, net at the end of the year, everything was up for almost all clients who were running their business well. And if not, you definitely got to call us. And so the question is, well, why was that? Well, the way I kind of look at it is the reason why was that things were better than they looked. Mm-hmm. And the question is, why did we react the way most people reacted? Firing staff, cutting all costs, not believing PPP would come through, questioning everything, wondering if the world was ending. The answer is fear or anxiety. And we talk a lot about in our training that in sales, when you get to a point of decision on a big decision, you get anxiety. Anxiety is not fear. It's sort of a false fear. It's fear that isn't there. People don't really have a fear of flying. They have an anxiety of flying. They don't really have a fear of heights. They have an anxiety of heights. They're aware that if they stand on a balcony, they're very unlikely to have the balcony fall off and fall to their death. But they still say, I fear that, because it's sort of this irrational, not really there fear. And we as business owners, as practice managers, I don't know if you want to call it fear, you want to call it anxiety, but when things go bad, especially when there's a shock to the system, like you're all shut down, sorry, that's right, naturally going to create some well-warranted concern, but also usually an overshooting of the moon, usually a sort of pendulum swing all the way to the hyper conservative. Right. And this is how we're wired for, the reason why, which is what I'm getting at, the reason why psychologically is we are wired this way for self-preservation, right? You see your kid do something they shouldn't and almost get hurt real bad. You ban it forever. Right. And maybe that's the right answer, but maybe there's a certain amount or a modicum of danger to a point that is reasonable given a certain activity like sports. You never want to see your kid get hurt, but keeping them inside their room till they're 18 is going to make them crazy. So how do you find that balance? And the pendulum swings back and forth and back and forth. Too much leeway, not enough. Too much leeway, not enough. And so we saw during a time of deep panic, anxiety, false fear, and overreaction to the negative. I think I need to lay off all my staff. I think I need to shut down everything. Now we've been in those good old days. We didn't know they were coming. In fact, we expected them not to come. But we look back 2.5 years later, whatever it might be, and we say, well, things are great. Yeah. Unemployment is at a 55-year low. True. People love aesthetics and they're buying a lot of it. Facts. Omicron and COVID are over. Maybe not, but we're in a good space right now. They're at a low roar, the cases, and it's a relatively less dangerous variant. Most people are either vaccinated or have had it. And so, yeah, we're in a much, much better place. People are going to sports games again. They're going to concerts. They're going to dinner, so we're in that moment. But we also may be overshooting the moon again and swinging the pendulum way more. And why is that? Well, when you have money in the bank, you feel rich. When you feel rich, you go spend. And you may not have enough for retirement. And so you're starting to see your clients, Ed and me as well. They're like, we just bought a new body tight and Renuvion. And then we're now carrying Quo. And we just bought a new XYZ machine. We just spent $300,000 on this. And then, and there's nothing wrong with those things per se. But the question is, does it make sense right now? If so, what's the strategy and plan? And that's what we want to talk about. It's not so much that we think right now one should simply stop spending, nor do we think right now one should be spending like crazy. We think that we should be making smart decisions based on ROI right now. I have some thoughts on what we're going to predict for the coming year,
Sure.
but your thoughts first, Ed, because I have gone on.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think that when we think about what to spend on, right, in so many ways, we're now in this roaring 20s place where we can say, well, finally, I can spend on blank.
We have the cash in the coffers now to buy it. Yeah,
exactly. And not only finally do we have the cash in the coffers, but finally, I feel that we've had a long enough run of success since the closure 2 years ago that I feel confident this is going to continue to go on. Now, of course, sometimes that misinforms your spending, right?
We thought things were going to be real bad 2 years ago and they weren't. And we think things are going to be real good right now, but are they?
Exactly. And of course, this is, I mean, in some ways, it almost smacks of the type of spending we saw in 2008, right? Where they're just like, yeah, this is great. Real estate prices are just going to keep going up. I own four properties now, right? And we saw the bottom fall out there. Now, I don't think that, I'm not necessarily predicting, and we're going to talk about, some prognostication. I'm not suggesting that's, imminent because of that, but it feels like that a little bit when people are like, no problem, I can do all these things. If I buy it, it will come. The demand will come, as I like to call it, the machine of dreams, right? It's sort of like, yeah, no, if I buy it,
bring people in, yeah,
exactly. Or if I rent the new space, because gosh, that's prime location, and I don't care if it, the prices have peaked right now already. I'm going to get that cherry space because gosh, I know I'll be able to fill it. The demand is there. Now, I think that I don't think that our consumer sentiment personally is going to change significantly as it relates to our industry, right? When it comes to plastic surgery, cosmetic treatments, procedures, I think that we've seen that people are more accepting and more excited about these sort of treatments, particularly in the non-surgical side, but also very much on the surgical than they've ever been. It's probably not going away. Now, also, our core consumer generally, depending on the type of practice you have, is also going to be less sensitive than other folks would be to swings in gas prices or any other commodity. It's not going to affect their daily life that much. As I say to the coordinators I work with who are worried about this, I'm like, if you have a patient who is concerned about the spike in gas prices, stop them from having a procedure because they should not be spending any of their money on this. Do not miss a rent payment for your lip filler. Okay. It's a bad idea. So I think that as we look a little bit more long-term, it should be fairly strong demand. However, we are also seeing a lot of changes within the labor market, right? We already know that there's going to be the risk of turnover. On average, 20% of anybody's team is going to turn over annually anyway. So if you've got 10 employees, chances are 2 of them won't be here in a year. So just prepare for that.
Market, that's going to happen. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, of course, now more than ever, unemployment is the lowest it's been since the 60s, like 60 years. Everyone who wants a job basically has one, and they're all making more money than they made last year. So when we think about what we should be spending the money on, right? When you fill in the blank, finally, I can buy blank or I can spend on blank. I think in some ways it's back to fundamentals, back to basics on profit centers and really what makes you the money. And in short, our hierarchy is always going to be number one, people. Spend more on people. Your biggest, line item on your P&L every year should be your payroll. And no, not just because you're on it, doctor, but because that's really what you're investing in. And then number 2 is your marketing. But also combined with the process and the training that you have for your people should really be the core expenditures. And some people are still forgetting that a little bit. And I think in our last topic, we talked about, the missed opportunities that so many practices are having. They're like, I'm really successful. I don't really actually need any help. I'm like, well, actually you're missing lots of opportunities and you just can't even see it because it feels like the good old days.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on the words cost center versus profit center. I think we have another podcast on that and also some articles on our website that are worth looking at, because that's our general philosophy is it's not whether you have the budget. You always have the budget unless you're a brand new doctor. It's really what's a good investment based on return on investment, unless it's a wildly unreasonable risk. And that kind of leads to sort of this just general topic of kind of working backwards and being intentional. So the last thing I want to touch on psychology and philosophy and prognostication, as you mentioned, misappropriation, which reminds me of Groundhog Day, which is just great. Watch the first step; it's a doozy. Don't tell me you don't remember me, because I sure as heck if I remember you.
Prognosticator or prognosticator. Needle nose Ned the head.
That's fun. So last thing on psychology really is this. So when we look ahead, so we've kind of talked about the reality that we have a tendency to overestimate how good things are when they're good, maybe to underestimate or overestimate how bad things are when they're bad. And really where we're at is this, as spring has sprung, as I mentioned, as we sort of kick off this next quarter, kind of Q2 22 and forward, one of the things that we know is that there is a tendency for things to stay sticky. And this is a concept we use a lot in investing. For those of you guys who spend a lot of time in the stock market, for me, it was more being a finance major way back in the day. But what happens is that, when bears want to be sure the stock market's going to drop, it tends to stay sticky to the upside a lot longer than they think, because people climb what they call the wall of worry. And when people are just disgusted with the market and just are catching the falling knife, as they say, and just losing money hand over fist, when you think it can't get any worse, it tends to stay sticky to the downside, and you just keep getting beat up. And we've had a few months like that in various times, but we know that over the course of time, the arc of the stock market bends towards the positive. And right now, whenever you see positive or negative hysteria, it is usually time to get concerned. And what we see in the market is a frothiness where it seems as if nothing can go wrong, where we just run right over Omicron. We just run right over the potential war in Ukraine. Well, it's real war in Ukraine. Potentially that moving to, goodness forbid, more World War status or more dangerous, even though it's a horrible situation already happening. And there's inflation happening. So there's this balance where we think everything is fantastic. Unemployment's at an all-time low. Inflation is starting to come up. People are making money, but then there's all these other headwinds that are coming at us, which is inflation, which is Ukraine potentially, which is oil wars, which is a potential new variant. We don't know what's next, but I guarantee something's coming. So my personal view is that even if everything goes south, which it may in the next 6 months to 3 years, this market for aesthetics is going to stay sticky to the upside. The exception to that would be a serious World War situation, God forbid. Other than that unlikely scenario, goodness willing, which we have to always operate from that's not going to happen, because the end of the world happens. The end of the world happens, just like we said in COVID 2 years ago. I'm like, well, if it's getting everyone, there's nothing anybody can do. The reality is that although all of those negative bears are correct, inflation is going up, and it's not going to stop with some rate hikes anytime soon. And wages are going through the roof, which makes it more expensive to run the business. And there is a war in Ukraine. All these things are true. Even if all that comes true, aesthetics is going to run, and it's going to run for a while. And I believe that it's going to run through the end of this year at least, and maybe longer. I also know that if you have an expectation the next 5 years are going to be really smooth and perfect, I also think that's very unlikely, because at some point things start crashing down. A recession may come, unemployment may come back, inflation may catch up with us. There's going to be a tightening in the economy. Any number of things are going to happen. We need to be prepared for that. So my recommendation is, as we kind of mentioned in our cost and profit center situation, which is another one of our big mantras, is don't act rich in the winter and pretend you're poor in the summer. Right. Remember the normal cycle of plastic surgery. Most doctors don't love September because it usually is a little stinky. Most doctors, very few doctors ever don't like March or April, because usually those are very busy, or Christmas week's usually busy. So if you spend all the money you make at Christmas, well, that's just a ding dong move, because you're going to have some anemic months. And if you feel poor and cut everything and fire all your vendors and burn bridges every September because you don't have cash flow, it's because you're a ding dong for not saving some money in the winter. Well, similarly, this is a very average time that I'm anticipating for the next couple of years. It may have ebbs and flows and ups and downs, but net, I think we're going to come out at a small, slow, steady, solid rate. Search volume is decreasing for aesthetics versus last year, but it's way up over 2 or 3 years ago,
Right.
which means we should be able to stay full and busy and continue on that path of growth. But it may not be multi-million dollar growth every year for everybody. I think aesthetics in general, as Ed said, are becoming more mainstream. It is more talked about. Social media continues to grow. People show off their BBLs and their breast dogs and their facelifts and their Botox and fillers. It's going to continue growing. It's going to normalize, but that doesn't mean it always is going to grow forever at a 20 or 30% clip. That's not reality. And so we need to be doing is thinking about our budget, which should be substantial, and where to invest it, which should be in smart places. But then again, work backwards, I think is what we want to finish the podcast with, which is how do we reverse engineer one or two of those examples and then utilize that tool set to apply to other decisions that you're making within the business.
Well, when you talk about the reverse engineering, of course, it makes me think a lot about how we prescribe the process of goal setting in a lot of ways, right? And actually thinking about what you want to do. And it's interesting because so many of our clients that we've been helping with this exercise and making sure they're doing their annual planning meetings and coming up with specific goals, in some ways, they, even though they had their 3 levels, right? Your must do level, the baseline, meaning your building burns down, there's a 40-year flood, and 3 different Omicron variants, hospitals are overrunning. We're still going to do, 200,000 this month, for example. That's your must do. Like no matter what happens, it's we're generally just going to do that. And then the second level is your should do, which is, look, things go our way. We don't have catastrophe, et cetera. We should be able to do blank, but gosh, if those things go our way and then we actually do really bust it and, we make some smart bets on hiring and people work a little extra hours, things like that, we could do the third highest level. So it's good to have these levels. Even the very lowest must-do level was a little pie in the sky, felt unrealistic and not really rooted in reality. Even giving room for some of the headwinds is almost like we felt the tailwinds. We had so much wind in our backs that they're just like, well, we must do this again. They're like, well, wait a minute, psychologically, let's work backwards from giving ourselves a little bit of breathing room.
Doc's out of town 2 weeks in March. He wasn't last year.
Exactly.
You're not going to grow by 30% that month.
Exactly. So how do we deconstruct what you can actually do, right? And I think that in general, it's a fairly straightforward philosophy, but look at each one of your months coming up, and really not just this year, but also heading into next year. I mean, gosh, it's already the second quarter of this year. 22 is flying by. So start planning, number one, looking at your schedule in real terms at what you think you can actually do. And then think about the variables that will not only just available treatment time per provider, but how far you might be able to be booked out, your actual level of pricing, and then reverse engineer it a bit from your marketing standpoint and take a look at your metrics and how many leads you might need to get in order to get the consultations that you need to book that number of procedures based on your booking ratios, for example. And then be thinking about what you need to be spending money on, because it's going to take 2 main things to achieve those goals. One is people, first and foremost. We talk to so many practices. They're like, what do you think you need? Just more leads. Just get me more leads. I'm like, well, no, because you are currently booked out 16 weeks for consultation and you book 10% of them same day. So that doesn't mean you need more leads. You got to plug the leaks in the gas tank before we can add more gas, as we always say.
Increase prices.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, increase prices. But one of the big metrics that you should look at too, I think it's fascinating when people are like, I feel real busy. I mean, gosh, I'm booked out 16 weeks for consultation. I'm like, what's your first available for surgery? They're like 3 weeks.
If
like,
you are
wait a
booked
minute.
out more than 2 weeks for consultation, please call us so we can make you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars more. You're doing it wrong. We promise. We have data showing it. I think we just broke 1.1 or not, if not 1.2 billion in sales oversight. Please call us.
Yeah. So first, now be thinking about what you can and should be spending on your people. I know that, Jon, you sent out our most recent 6-month mantra very recently and talking about investment in your existing staff. But it's not just necessarily in the form of raises. And I would love for you to elaborate a little bit on that, but also in their training and making sure they're actually following the right processes. It's interesting because even though we probably do owe our people more than your standard year-over-year cost of living increase given inflation. And yes, even if they aren't asking for it, they want it. Everyone does. And frankly, they probably deserve it, especially if they've been with you for more than, say, 12 months because of everything everybody's had to work through. And because the replacement cost of any of those people is the highest it's ever been, for sure. If anybody on your staff leaves, you're just going to be paying more than you probably are paying your current team anyway to replace that human for a new person. So it's worth spending it on the loyalty. But what's interesting is it's not only about money. I've had a lot of folks who are really tenured in the practice we work with who are actually specifically asking for other benefits like training, like travel to meetings, not just our seminar, but like other meetings where they can get some good information, be around their peers in the industry, that type of development. So think about how you can invest in your people, and then you can think about marketing to get those leads.
Yeah, and you actually hit on sort of an example I was going to give. And I think when we think about kind of narrowing this to specific actionable steps, which I think you just gave several exact examples of how you think through that, how you think through employee pay, how you think through whatever else you
schedule management. Yeah,
schedule management. And so one of the things I think about an intentional person doing, or at least something that I'm really working on, is asking a good question. And then again, reverse engineering. So one question I'd ask, I really think of growth as two different things. Growth is answering the question, how do I avoid catastrophe? Because if I have catastrophe, really bad situations, really problematic stuff, all my other good ideas kind of don't matter because they're just maybe filling some of those leaks. And then second, if I could avoid those worst cases that at least that I have effects over, then how do I kind of, get to the next level? And so a couple of questions I might ask myself as a business owner, practice manager, or even salesperson trying to hit my own records and get to the next level. I mean, I was a coordinator for 7 years. I loved it. We each have goals. We're competitive. We want to beat ourselves. We want to beat everybody else on our team. One question I'd be thinking about is this: what are the 3 or 4 things that if they go wrong in the next 3 months are going to create a world of SH-T for me? Yeah. And to me, when I think about that for my practices, the first thing I think about you just answered, which is if a top level person, there's good turnover and there's things that happen, but if one of my top people, a high level practice manager, a high level patient coordinator leaves, particularly due to something I can control, like money or opportunity or the way I'm treating them, that is something where overnight I can lose hundreds of thousands or millions. It's very hard to find good people right now. Even if you do, you got to train them. Even if you find good people who you train them, people are weird, things happen, they move, things come up, they're not as committed to you as the person who's there before. So if I have good people I want to retain, number one, how do I do that? And so I work backwards from that. Ed gave some good ideas. Are they making market average or a little bit more? Maybe even a little bit more. Or at least, and that to me is not all base pay and just having a big lump sum of cash because they say so, but having a base pay and an incentive or commission structure, assuming legally allowable, that really puts them on the path to be at the top of their market for your area, plus a little bit. One of the reasons that Ed and I didn't ever leave the practice we were at was we enjoyed our work, but also we made more than every other coordinator in the state, probably. We're also way better than everybody else in the state. And we made the doctor's life easy. He got to go home. He got to enjoy his life. He got to see his kids. There's no stress. And so both for peace of mind and my own income as a business owner, I want to retain my very top people. So in my office, we've created ownership pools. I just gave $60,000 out for this quarter to our executive team. Yesterday, I wrote checks. Yeah. I want them there for money. Then it's not only money, like we said, but it may be money. It may be travel. It may be other incentives. So we can reverse engineer that. Say, do I have those relationships shored up? Maybe it's ensuring another common problem we've seen throughout COVID, including some of our practices, even today. We still don't have enough places to do surgery. We don't have our own OR. And if we don't have our own OR, we have one place at some local hospital or some local surgery center, and that's it. And you know what? You are asking for it. And they say, well, we don't have any time this month. Sorry. We're raising our fees by $3,000 an hour. Sorry. And all of a sudden, even if you try to change in that moment, it could take you 60 days getting accredited, doing all the stuff, checking out the staff. And just like that, you lose 300 grand. So that might be a second thing that you think about. And there may be others. So what are the things if they go wrong in the next few months? Now, we can't affect World War III, and we can't affect if a new variant comes out much. We can prepare for the variants, by the way. We can make sure we have a nest egg of cash. So a third thing I think about is what about those things that, John, I don't really control. I can't control hurricanes, and I can't control tornadoes, and I can't control wildfires, and I can't control wars. Yeah, well, how much money do you have saved?
Yeah.
Do you have 6 months worth of revenue saved, ideally, not just even operating expenses. That's a starting level, but 6 months worth of revenue saved. So if you're doing 200 grand, you want to have about $1 million in the bank for a rainy day. Then you can withstand the next 6 month or 1 year war, the next complete shutdown to some weird variant we can't anticipate. So putting some money in the old piggy bank is a good idea there. So what can I do that? And then second, reverse engineering the things that what holds us back from getting to the highest level. What are 3 or 4 ideas where if I don't have the worst things happen, those catastrophe issues, I've got my team shored up, I got some money on hand, I've got everything organized, I've got surgery center, I've got backups, I've got kind of the insurance side of the business. What is it that separates us from the next level? And I just work down my marketing ladder. One of the first questions I ask is, does my patient care coordinator book between 70 and 98% of their patients the very same day before they leave? Do they make between 250 and 600 phone calls or emails or texts a week to new patients and existing patients? If the answer is no, I want either a new person or more likely just want to get them training if they're a great person who doesn't have training. If that's shored up, then I'm thinking about the next leak in the gas tank. Do I have the appropriate marketing? And Ed, I won't go into too much detail there, but Ed talked about, how's your web team doing? Are they exceptional? Do you have an amazing social media presence? All these different marketing steps that go down the marketing ladder. We can send you some slides on it if you email us. You can come see us in Vegas, talk about it, talk to John Barry at SEO Oversight, our social media team, and Sean. But reverse engineering and saying intentionally. And that leads me to the very last point I want to make on this podcast, which is when we see people bring in a new service, a new treatment, and goodness forbid a new machine, which you guys are all going out and buying and you're getting ready to go to all your meetings and buy more machines. It's not that we're anti-machine. They're great. It's not that we're anti-big companies. In fact, we're super excited to be speaking at Sientra Academy moving forward. I think we're their only a medical consulting team that's going to be speaking at the Sientra Academy as of now. And we're excited to teach those doctors about how to sell more implants. And that's a supply you need from a medical company. Wonderful. But when we go out and spend $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, what we're seeing is go, get ready, get set. And what we need to do is get ready, get set, and then go. Yeah. And so what we're saying is it's fiscal year end. They're giving me 40 grand off. I don't care. There'll be another quarter or another fiscal year end to buy that product from that company. And they may be a great company with a great product, with a really good salesperson who's a good person. And I want to buy it from them. But if we're going to go out and spend 200 grand on the machine, let me ask a few questions first. Who do you have on your team that's going to be dedicated to spearheading the project? Who's going to make sure there's training done? What days will the training occur? How much revenue will you lose by taking your providers out to train them? Number 2, who's adding it to the website, building out the web page dedicated to it? How much money have you invested in SEOing that particular page, that particular project? What does your web team think? Who's going to be dedicated to putting up on social media and preparing email blasts related to it? What are you going to do after you cross-sell to your 10,000 people in your database, of which 25 people buy the thing, and then that's it? To get new business in the door? Do you have paid social media PPC going on? Do you understand the laws and rules, like how you can't advertise Botox using the word Botox? Do you know all that? Do you have a game plan for paid social media advertising on Instagram and Facebook or TikTok or LinkedIn or Twitter? Do you have the staff excited about it? Is there an incentive plan in place for that staff so that they're pumped up about selling it, or are they just being told we need to sell this new box that sits in this corner? What is the time and how does it take away from the schedule from the providers? Do we need to hire a new individual in order to be dedicated to that? And how do we factor that in? Do we have at least 2x the price of the machine to spend on marketing? If I'm spending 100 grand, I want 200 grand more for marketing it. If not, you're not going to do very well with it. You may eventually pay it off and then it sits in the corner or whatever. So if you're buying a laser hair removal machine, you're going to charge $200 an area and it's $73,000. You got a long uphill battle. If you're buying a $300,000 machine that sells a $3,000 thing, you got to get 100 sales, assuming all profit, no disposables and no commission and nobody working on it to get close to break even. It's going to take years and years. So you've got to start with all that stuff and actually say, okay, we don't want to have 100 projects and get none of them done and get analysis paralysis. And you guys know who you are, doctors. Your team is completely fed up with you and you just have 100 different ideas and none of them ever get done. And when they do get done, it's like a miracle. And then they're like annoyed with you because you're annoying and you're micromanaging, but you're also like have 100 new ideas. Or you're the opposite. And you're like, I bought 4 new things. I made a really quick decision. I'd like you guys to sell these things. And then they're annoyed with you because you have too many things. You're spending too much money. And then you put the pressure on them for your own overinvestment and your own cash poorness, when in fact, they didn't do anything wrong. They were just selling what they had. You didn't talk to them about how to launch it. So how do you pick off somewhere in the middle of those two? What are 2 or 3 ideas we want to get done this quarter? Let's reverse engineer those and let's get ready first, then let's get set, and then let's pull the trigger and go. Then when those are launched and good, let's go again. And a final example of that is we do this in our office. We typically will have no more than 2 new clients that launch for YellowTelescope every quarter. per consultant. Because if you do more than that, we don't do a perfect job. And we want to do an A+, A job, never an A- even. And we know we can handle that. So we will wait till we have a new consultant who does exceptional work before we ever take on more clients, or we'll book ourselves out 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year to make sure we deliver the product, because we will never sacrifice the quality of what we do. And that takes some intentionality. We still end up growing because of it, because we maintain a reputation of excellence, because we always deliver. And that's what you guys should be doing medically at the end of the day. These are my thoughts and reverse engineered topics. The floor is yours.
Well said, my friend. It's actually probably a good time for us to wrap up. I'm getting close to touching up my glass. But
is that what we call that? Could someone fix this?
Touch me up. No, but I am going to do it intentionally, with intentionality. No, I fully agree with you. I think that what we're kind of hoping to see in some ways is folks take a step back, take a deep breath, and take a look at the big picture, not just thinking that, gosh, again, this is just going to last forever. And I don't actually need to really have a plan because it's just going to be like this forever. It's to try to be realistic, try to, again, get ready, get set, then go when it comes to really anything. But also that getting set is so important, because it's got to be about your people. It's got to be about the marketing and making sure that you have a specific plan about that before really doing anything else. So, but other than that, very bullish on the rest of the year, as at least with regard to our industry and our clients. That doesn't mean you don't have to be smart. Be smart about the investment. Still build the foundation for longevity for years to come. But I'm also just really excited about the rest of the year. I'm excited to get to ASAPS in a couple of weeks and see some folks in person and see what else is going on, and then meet some clients and some brand new folks, hang out with the team, be in Vegas. We're going to be in Cancun in our team retreat, making sure the Ritz-Carlton's okay for our guests. September 30th.
Gotta just check it out. A couple of days to check it out. Just I want to test the sand in the water, just make sure that's still nice there.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste anyone's time if it's not very good beaches.
We have high standards. If it's good enough for us, it'll be good enough for them. Some
intentionality, that is for sure. That is
indeed. But we'll be recording again at that point anyway, so hopefully we'll have some more updates.
Well, it's been an exciting day for me. I got to spend the morning hitting my first round of golf in about 2 or 3 months, and I got to tell you, it was hot out there. By the way, really hot.
How hot?
Know where I'm going, don't you? Actually, there's a lot of hens out there, and they were actually picking up the worms with oven mitts. So it was warm. It was warm out there today. We know summer's coming. Things are sizzling. Things are heating up, literally and figuratively, here in Florida. Excited about everything that we have to come, and can't wait to record with you in Cancun and see many hundreds of you at the annual YellowTelescope seminar, 12th annual in Cancun, Mexico, in late September, early October. It's going to be epic. Join. All the best. As parting shots, as always, we appreciate everybody's support, feedback, recommend any topics you have to us. We'll try to get them on. We actually be recording a number more of these this year. We hope to see you at upcoming meetings and our seminar. If you need help with web, make sure you're checking out seoversight.com and social media, icescreamsocialmedia.com, little I, shouting ice cream cone, scream, socialmedia.com. Both are growing and doing extremely well. We're super excited about things. I will also mention this. We like to maybe do a little humble brag, or not so humble brag here or there. We have some good things happen. So probably the thing I was most proud of last year was winning the best places to work in South Florida, because that hopefully means our team's happy. But we just got our repeat award for the Financial Times 500 fastest growing companies in North America for 2021, which for us was probably our slowest year in terms of growth, because we lagged about a year behind the doctors. And we're already on pace for a much bigger growth percentage this year. So I'm hoping we can repeat there as we head for, I think, our 5th year in a row, ending 5,000 and so on. So appreciate everybody's support. We got amazing clients and an awesome team, and we are raring to go. Oh, and we're building a new app, so get ready.
Watch out. Exciting things to come. Cheers, my friend.
Play us out, Matthew, Jill, Sean, whoever. Cheers, everybody.